The perfect neighbor. The shocking truth behind a man everyone trusted. Blue lights flashed outside the old brick building. 2 Milwaukee police officers stood at the door of apartment 213, the place that always smelled off. Inside, the quiet man everyone trusted sat on the couch, hands folded, voice calm. He said there was a mix-up. He said they could look around if they wanted. One officer opened a drawer and froze. Strange tools. Another found a stack of photos that did not look like vacation pictures at all. The room felt colder. The man watched them with steady eyes. Then an officer walked to the small refrigerator, wrapped his hand around the handle, and pulled. He saw something and gasped. Weeks earlier, the summer air on 25th Street was warm and lazy. Kids rode bikes. Folks grilled in the courtyard. If you asked anyone about Jeffrey, they'd say he was quiet, polite, and helpful. He held doors, mumbled sorry when he bumped into someone, and sometimes carried groceries for the lady down the hall. He paid rent on time. He didn't throw parties. He just kept to himself. People called him the perfect neighbor because there was never a problem. In a city where everyone was busy, a calm neighbor felt like a gift. No one guessed that something was terribly wrong. But small things made people wonder. A strange, sweet-rotten smell drifted from under his door. When someone asked about it, he looked embarrassed and said his food had spoiled and he'd clean it up. Other times he told the building manager his freezer broke or his fish went bad. The story changed a little, but his voice stayed soft and friendly. He never raised it. He never seemed angry. And because most folks wanted peace, they believed him. They went back to their lives, put the smell out of mind, and told themselves it was none of their business. Across the hall, Angela, a no-nonsense neighbor, kept a notepad by her phone. She wrote dates and times when the smell was strong or when she heard a loud thump and then silence. She did not like what she was noticing. She called the manager. She even called police once when she saw someone run down the stairs looking scared. But after a quick check, nothing came of it. Angela felt uneasy, but what could she do? Jeffrey met her eyes in the hallway and said, "Good evening, ma'am," like a perfect gentleman. It made her doubt her own worry. On payday Fridays, Jeffrey walked home with a grocery bag and a six-pack. He moved with the slow steps of a person who didn't want attention. He kept his head down, unlocked his door, and disappeared. Sometimes the smell returned after these trips, and Angela wrote another note. Other nights, there was humming, maybe a saw, maybe a blender. Then music turned up just loud enough to blur the sound. Downstairs, the super knocked once and asked him to turn it down. "Of course," Jeffrey said. The music lowered. The humming stopped. Quiet again. In the morning, the hallway smelled like bleach. Milwaukee was busy that year. People worked late, watched the news, and tried to stretch paychecks. In that rush, most neighbors wanted simple answers. Spoiled meat? Okay. A broken freezer? Fine. Life kept moving. But Angela kept feeling a pull in her stomach that said, this isn't right. One night, she met Jeffrey by the mailboxes. His hand shook slightly as he sorted letters, but his voice was steady. "Long day," he said with a small smile. "You know how it is." She nodded, but she didn't smile back. The elevator door closed between them with a soft, final click. Then came a night when sirens wailed blocks away and kept going. A young man ran into the street and flagged officers. He said he had just escaped from apartment 213. He said things that made the officers look at each other. It was too wild to be true, too detailed to be made up. They followed the young man back, climbed the stairs, and knocked. The door opened. Jeffrey stood there, neat and polite like always. He said there was a misunderstanding. He said everyone could calm down. He even chuckled softly, as if they were all being silly. The officers stepped inside to hear both sides. The apartment was small, tidy in a strange way, with cleaning bottles stacked neatly on the floor and air fresheners plugged into every outlet. A fish tank glowed green in the corner. On the coffee table lay a set of cuffs and a camera. The officers kept their faces steady and asked for ID. Jeffrey nodded and pointed toward the bedroom. "Wallets in the dresser," he said. His voice was even. His hands didn't shake now. He watched them walk down the short hall, as if he'd watched this scene many times before. One officer opened a drawer to look at a wallet and found something else. Photographs that showed people in poses no one should see. The color drained from his face. He handed them to his partner with a glance that said everything. The partner's mouth tightened. "Cuff him," he said, voice suddenly hard. In the living room, the young man who had flagged him stared at the door, ready to run if things went bad. Jeffrey stood up slowly, surprised for the first time. He reached out as if to snatch the photos back. The officer stepped between them, firm. In the kitchen, the other officer pulled open the refrigerator door to finish the search. The cold air rolled out, and he saw what made him gasp, the proof that the smell had never been spoiled meat. He slammed the door, voice shaking now, and called for backup. Outside, neighbors gathered in the hall, asking questions no one could answer yet. Inside apartment 213, the polite man with the soft voice was no longer just a neighbor. He was under arrest. As the radio crackled and boots pounded up the stairs, the officer opened the refrigerator one more time. Then everything moved at once. The hallway outside apartment 213 filled with voices, radios, and boot steps. Officers moved in and out, tagging every item they found. The air smelled like bleach and coal metal. Jeffrey sat in cuffs by the door, still speaking in that calm voice, saying it was all a mistake. The young man who had flagged the police kept his eyes on the floor, hands shaking. Angela stood behind the yellow tape, one hand over her mouth. She kept thinking of all the times she had smelled something wrong and told herself it was none of her business. Now she knew. Detectives arrived with boxes, gloves, and clipboards. They talked in short sentences. Photographs logged. Refrigerator sealed. Kitchen tools bagged. They took pictures of every corner, walls, sink, floor, trash, and even the fish tank. No one raised their voice. The quiet made it worse. A detective guided Angela to a chair in the hall and asked simple questions. What she smelled, what she heard, and when she called. Angela answered carefully, but her mind kept drifting to small moments that now felt big. The softum at night, the bleach in the morning, the way Jeffrey never truly blinked. At the station, Jeffrey sat in an interview room with pale walls and a humming light. He was offered water. He said yes. He asked for a sandwich. He ate slowly, as if he had nowhere to be. The detectives began with the basics. Name, job, where he grew up. He answered plainly. Then they asked about the photos. He paused and nodded. The room became even quieter. One detective clicked a pen, and the recording machine on the table blinked red. "Tell us everything," the detective said. "Start at the beginning." Jeffrey leaned back and began to talk. He spoke like someone reading a map, each stop marked by dates and small details. He said he was lonely. He said he was afraid of people leaving. He said he liked control. He talked about luring people with promises that sounded friendly and normal. Each word felt like a door closing. The detectives took turns asking follow-ups, keeping their voices calm, even when the answers made their stomachs turn. They stopped him when he drifted into anything graphic. "We do not need detail," one detective said firmly. "Stick to facts. Names, times, places." Jeffrey nodded and kept going. Back at the building, the neighbors stood in the courtyard, clinging to each other and to questions. A pastor came and offered short prayer. Counselors from the city arrived and set up chairs for anyone who needed to talk. Reporters gathered behind a line of tape across the street, speaking into cameras about the quiet man next door and the shocking truth inside apartment 213. A city worker nailed a notice to the entrance. The unit was sealed by order of law. People read the notice twice because it did not feel real. They asked each other the same question. How? Days turned into weeks. The evidence grew into a mountain. Photos, tools, diaries, lists, and items that pointed to many victims over many years. Families across the city came forward with missing person posters, hoping for answers and fearing them at the same time. Detectives formed a task force, then a hotline. The case file thickened. Officers were offered counseling, too, because the scenes and statements were heavy to carry. At the district attorney's office, a team began to plan the charges. The list was long. The tone in every meeting was careful and measured. "We will do this right." When the charges were finally announced, people filled the courthouse steps. The district attorney stood at a podium and spoke clearly. Multiple murders, felony evidence, and a long trail of acts that shocked the city and the nation. He reminded everyone that the court would avoid all graphic displays. "We will focus on facts," he said. "We will honor the families. We will protect the public." Beside him, officers stood in a neat line. Cameras flashed. Microphones clicked. Someone in the crowd whispered, "He lived right above me." The words floated up the courthouse steps and hung in the air. Inside the courtroom, the first hearings felt unreal. Jeffrey entered in a plain jumpsuit, eyes low, hands cuffed. The judge spoke in a steady voice about rights, charges, and next dates. Family members of the missing sat shoulder to shoulder, clutching tissues and photos. The court clerk read names and counts that seemed to go on forever. At one point, a mother stood and asked, "Why?" No one had an answer that could help. The judge nodded to the bailiff. An order returned. The hearings ended quickly, but the weight of them seemed to bend the room itself. As more evidence was confirmed, the story spread far beyond Milwaukee. People across America asked the same hard questions. How did this hide in plain sight? How can anyone tell the difference between a quiet neighbor and a dangerous one? Experts spoke on the news about warning signs, mental health, and how to report concerns. Landlords reviewed safety rules. Police departments studied ways to respond better to strange smell calls and frightened residents. Angela testified when asked, calm and firm. "If something feels wrong," she said, "keep calling, keep a list. Tell someone again, do not let it slide." On the day of sentencing, the courtroom was fuller than ever. The judge's bench stood like a wall of wood and law. Families spoke one by one, voices shaking, faces brave, about children, brothers, and friends who never came home. The room was so quiet that each word felt like a bell. Then the judge delivered the sentence, life after life after life, with no chance of release. The gavel hit the block like thunder. Jeffrey was led away, face blank, the chain at his wrist clinking softly. As the doors closed behind him, a mother stood, lifted a photo to the ceiling light, and cried out a single name, clear, strong, and full of love, just as the hallway erupted with the heavy echo of boots and cameras rushing forward. Months passed, but the name Jeffrey Dahmer still echoed through every news broadcast and newspaper. The courthouse was quiet now, yet people in Milwaukee still spoke of apartment 213 in low voices. The building was eventually torn down, leaving behind an empty lot surrounded by chain-link fences. Flowers and candles often appeared there, placed by those who still mourned. Angela walked by sometimes but never stopped. She couldn't. Every time she did, she heard the faint hum she once ignored, the sound that should have told her something was wrong. Inside the prison, Jeffrey lived in silence much like he had before, quiet, polite, almost invisible. Guards said he never caused trouble, never raised his voice. Some inmates avoided him completely, while others whispered his name like he was a ghost. In the cafeteria, he sat alone, eating neatly, his tray perfectly arranged. The world outside kept changing, but his days stayed the same. Lights on, count meals, lights out. Even there behind bars, he seemed strangely calm, as if the weight of his crimes never reached his mind. Back in Milwaukee, the families of victims tried to move forward. Support groups met in church basements where mothers and fathers shared stories of the children they lost. They brought photos, smiling faces, graduation pictures, memories that hurt to look at. Counselors reminded them that healing didn't mean forgetting. But for many, the fear never left. Locks were changed, doors double-bolted, and strangers were no longer trusted so easily. "You never really know who your neighbor is," one woman said softly. The room nodded in agreement. Angela was asked to appear on a local news program about community safety. Sitting under bright lights, she looked older than before, eyes heavy with what she'd seen. When a reporter asked her what advice she'd give others, she didn't hesitate. "Listen to your instincts," she said. "If something feels wrong, even a little, say something. Say it again. Don't stop until someone listens." Her words replayed on the evening news and were quoted in newspapers across the country. People called her brave, but she didn't feel brave, just tired. Meanwhile, psychologists studied Jeffrey's behavior, tried to understand how someone who looked so ordinary could do such terrible things. They spoke about control, loneliness, and the need to dominate. None of it made sense to regular people, but it was all part of learning how to stop something like this from happening again. The case became part of police training programs and psychology courses. For years after, whenever people heard about a quiet man who kept to himself, they thought of that small apartment in Milwaukee. Inside the prison, whispers spread. Some inmates resented the attention Jeffrey got from the media. Others mocked him, calling him the monster in passing. He didn't respond. He just cleaned tables, mopped floors, and followed orders. But tension built quietly, like a storm in the distance. One morning, as he was led to the work area, a guard noticed how still the hallways seemed. It was almost too quiet. Jeffrey didn't speak. Another inmate walked behind him, his eyes cold, his jaw tight. That day started like any other. The sound of keys, clanging metal, footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. But by mid-morning, something felt off. Guards noticed inmates whispering, eyes darting toward the cleaning area. 2 men had been assigned to work alongside Jeffrey. They moved through the motions silently, scrubbing and mopping. A supervisor passed by and gave them a nod, not realizing what was about to happen. The air was thick, heavy with the kind of quiet that only comes before something sudden. In the next few minutes, the silence was broken by a crash, metal hitting tile, a shout, then chaos. Guards ran, radios blaring. Inmates pressed against cell bars to see what was happening. By the time officers reached the area, one man was on the ground, and another stood over him, breathing hard, weapon in hand. It was over as quickly as it began. When the officers pulled the attacker away, Jeffrey lay still on the cold floor, the red from his jumpsuit mixing with the gray around him. The guards shouted for medics, but deep down they knew. The news spread fast. Jeffrey Dahmer killed in prison. The headlines read. Reporters gathered outside again, just like the day he was first arrested. Some people felt relief. Others felt nothing could ever make up for what had been lost. The families gathered quietly that evening, candles flickering in the wind. It doesn't bring them back, one mother said, her voice breaking. But maybe now he can't hurt anyone else. Across Milwaukee, lights burned late into the night as the city remembered the fear, the loss, and the strange man who once lived next door. Angela stood by her window, watching the empty lot where apartment 213 used to be. The snow fell quietly, covering the ground where so many secrets had once been buried. She whispered to herself, "It's over now." But part of her knew it would never truly be over. The story of Jeffrey Dahmer, the man everyone thought was kind, polite, and harmless, had changed how people saw the world forever. Behind every quiet door, there could be something unthinkable. And as she turned away from the window, the lights flickered once, and the night swallowed the sound of the city whole. To be continued.